So the chief priests and the experts of the law, the Pharisees, have another question for Jesus today while Jesus is teaching in the temple courts. They ask him, "By whose authority are you teaching anyone? And who gave you this authority?" Once again, context is important here because previously Jesus had just cast out the money chambers, and has been teaching during the week of Passover in the temple courts for all to hear, and they have been in awe and amazed by his teachings. Now, the high priest and the Pharisees don't like this because that is a direct impedance to their own authority and influence over the people. And so this question is really just meant to challenge Jesus' authority to the people around him. The chief priest is not interested in where Jesus gets his authority. He just doesn't want to lose his. But Jesus knows the point, their hearts. Jesus knows their hearts and why they're asking this question. So rather than answer the question directly, he does what we refer to in rhetorical circles as reversing the burden of truth. He answers their question with a question of his own. Now, at first, it might look like Jesus is being evasive here, but he has a very good reason for not answering the Pharisees' question. And that's this. Whenever truth and power are on opposite sides of the argument, then there's no longer much point in arguing anymore. Because both sides are no longer playing the same game. Jesus doesn't need to tell the high priest that his authority comes from heaven because he knows that the high priest doesn't care. The question is not meant to be an honest one. The question is meant to take Jesus' authority away from the people who are hearing Jesus teach. And so Jesus says, before I answer your question about my authority, let me ask you a question about somebody else's. The baptism of John, was that from heaven or was that a human institution? So Jesus essentially turns their own trap back onto them by reversing the burden of truth, or reversing the burden of proof. Because yes, Jesus wasn't a traditional rabbi, but neither was John the Baptist. And so now the Pharisees are essentially trapped because the people believe that John the Baptist was from heaven. So the Pharisees cannot both appease the crowd without also giving Jesus authority and power. Because if John the Baptist was from heaven, then he was right when he said that Jesus was the Messiah. And if Jesus is the Messiah, then he has all the power and authority. The Pharisees are stuck here. And so they do what, unfortunately, most people do when they find out that they're on the wrong side of the truth. They refuse to answer the question. That being the case, Jesus says, neither then will I tell you where my authority comes from.